Good morning, everybody. My name is Kenyatta Skiles, and I will be the moderator for today's episode of EYEJ Speaks. Thank you to all who joined us last week for the conversation on investing in your future. This week, we will be discussing the topic of exploring justice. For those who are unfamiliar with the work of Empowering Youth Exploring Justice, let me provide you with just a brief overview and impact of our work. EYEJ serves over 1,500 youth annually with the mission of empowering and amplifying the voices of teens and preteens by bridging them with diverse individuals to engage in interactive discussions centered around social justice. We do so through programs including Youth Online Discussing Justice, or YODJ, which is a 12-week program for 6th through 12th graders that was created as a response to the COVID pandemic. And to ensure youth have a virtual platform to exchange ideas and gain perspective on social justice issues with diverse and empowered community members, peers, and volunteers. We also have a youth council, which is a group of highly impressive young people ages 15 to 25 from all across districts in Cleveland, who together are brainstorming ideas and addressing challenges both they and their peers face in the community. EYEJ Speaks, the program you're looking at right now, is an interactive community discussion that features engaging conversations on social justice and civil rights issues. The topics you see here today are derived from the Youth Online Discussing Justice program. So whether you're watching us on Facebook or Zoom, be sure to ask questions, make comments, and use the hashtags EYEJSpeaks and social justice in the comment section. Also, if you haven't done so already, be sure to follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. We cannot do this work without your help, and I would like to thank everybody who's made a donation to our Empower campaign. Most recently, your contributions have enabled EYEJ to deploy 2 new youth online programs, ensuring technological infrastructure needs are in place to deliver learning services while youth remain sheltered in place. And your donations have helped EYEJ Youth Council members and their families to cover household costs for bills, healthcare, food, and more. I'm also excited to announce that the Youth Council on July 24th, starting at 9 a.m., will be hosting a 24-hour day of giving campaign, where we are hoping to raise $20,000 in support of the amazing work the Youth Council members are undertaking and to support their families during this challenging time. So we will have a special speaker event from 2 to 4 p.m., where we will hear firsthand from council members. Be sure to visit our Facebook page as well as our other social media platforms for more information about our Day of Giving on July 24th. We'll see you then. And now on to the topic of exploring violence, I'd like to start with a quote from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who once said, "Violence brings only temporary victories. Violence, by creating many more social problems than it solves, never brings permanent peace." So young people across this country are vulnerable to violence. They're facing it in their schools, on social media, television, and in their neighborhoods and homes. So with this barrage of exposure to violence on a daily basis, what are the impacts to their immediate but also long-term success as they transition into adulthood? And how can parents and other adults protect and support these children when the disturbances they're seeking to escape are no further than their front door? So we have an amazing panel today, and we're going to be jumping into the conversation of violence. Not only some of the challenges and what we're currently seeing, but what are some solutions and ways to empower communities? So the panelists include for today's discussion, Mai Moore, founder and executive director of EYEJ, Yumi Nglovu, youth council member, Miguel Gino Tucker, Organizing Director of Juvenile Justice Coalition, Sharina Cloud, a nonprofit and community leader, and Charmin Leon, police sergeant and community advocate. Thank you all for joining us this morning. So to set the tone for today's discussion, of course, Maya, I always come to you first and ask, why is this conversation on exploring violence incorporated into the Youth Online Discussing Justice virtual program? Why is this important? And what are some of the conversations that you're hearing from youth and the impact of discussing violence?
Sure. Thank you everybody for watching. Thank you to Kenyatta and Sharam and Tara who are making this possible. And thank you to this incredible, very powerful panel. And I can't wait to hear them speak. But just to back up a little bit, the reason why I started EYEJ 7 years ago is because of the Trayvon Martin ruling. And the truth of it is I knew that this this murder was going to be more popular in the media, but really the truth is that I know that particular situation is literally happening every single day in this country. Thanks to Kenyatta explaining a little bit about YODJ, which really is a branch of our core program, the discussion series, which we do in schools, where we talk about relevant everyday topics, such as obviously violence, toxic stress, conflict resolution, and police-youth relationships. This violence topic really stemmed from our police-youth relationships topic because we kept hearing from our 6th to 8th grade youth more and more about violence. And so then when we started looking into our data, we were seeing that the number one thing that our youth wanted changed in their community was violence. So I said, okay, violence is very broad. So what does that really mean? So we brought in Kent State University. They did a whole evaluation, thanks to Talia Anguiano. And so we asked them, let's start digging deeper. What is this violence? When kids reference violence, what does it mean? And so this is a really tough topic for me because when you start digging into the data, it is very sad, to be honest. We asked the kids, what kind of violence do you personally experience in your community? And we gave them 9 options ranging from, gun violence, gang violence, bullying, sexual violence, verbal violence, physical fights. And it is literally, the data is spread out across the board pretty evenly. So you can imagine how complex this topic is and how important it is to discuss this with our youth, to provide healing, hope, new ideas for solutions, but to really lift some weight off these kids' shoulders, to be honest. And then we asked the kids, what's, about their stresses going on in their life. And there's a lot of stresses. These kids are definitely under toxic stress. But 23% of them talked about how violence is a major stress of theirs. And beyond that, we have had time after time after time, whether it's in our youth council or even YODJ. We just had one of our YODJ students talk about how he's just experienced personally close friends who have been murdered. I mean, this is just an ongoing topic over and over. And the problem is that the healing is not occurring. It's almost like it's the norm that we accept these deaths and we keep on going. We don't deal with these deaths. We just suck it up and keep going. And so this is a big topic, very important topic. My personal worry is that 3 things, and then I'll hand it off to Kenyatta for the next question, is that, understandably so, with the oppression that's happening, all that's happening with the murders, that a lot of kids are taught from very early to protect themselves by fighting. And then the other worry is that a lot of our kids, again, we see it on a day-to-day basis, are extremely traumatized from youth deaths. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic background that you're from. And then the third thing is we do see at the same time some youth who think violence is fun, whether they're learning about it from video games or it is a call for attention on social media. So this again is a very complex topic and definitely needs to be talked about and shared with the community to come together to create solutions.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for setting that tone. So Yumi, let me ask you, as a member of the youth council, how do you feel your participation is bringing greater attention to some of the local conversations about violence from a youth perspective, and what are some of the concerns that you personally or some of the other youth council members have expressed?
Mhm. So, being part of the youth council, I've definitely experienced and heard a lot of horror stories related to gun violence, especially. And I feel as though the members of the youth council go to this space as a place where they can really open up and share their stories and share their experiences, which is really positive. Um, and I feel like a lot of this stems from, as my mom was saying, um, like parents are teaching their kids this way. They're often taught not to trust law enforcement or police, so they don't have other ways to protect or rely on other people. So it's obviously a huge problem in our community, and it's a problem that is being solved by people that have not directly experienced this problem. So stigmas and stereotypes are often put around um, the gun violence and issues of violence. So I feel like it's a problem that needs to be battled head on, and it needs to be talked about by the people that are experiencing this, just as members of the youth council are doing right now.
Thank you. Thank you. And speaking of law enforcement, Sergeant Leon, thank you for joining us this morning. As a member of law enforcement, you have the role of maintaining order, but that can be difficult, especially when there's a lack of trust from the communities you're supposed to serve. There's a poll that came out recently that cites that 36% of Black Americans trust the police, while 77% of whites and 69% of Americans overall said the same. So, before being able to address the issues of community violence, how does law enforcement in Cleveland work to build that trust and break down some of those barriers and concerns?
Well, thank you for having me. I'd like to thank the young lady for what she shared too. She hit on a lot of really good topics. As far as Cleveland and our building our relationships with the community, the Cleveland Division of Police, actually the city of Cleveland, is in a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. And so in that settlement agreement, we have quite a few what we call deliverables that we have to accomplish to satisfy that agreement. And one of the things is something called the CPOP plan. It's the Community and Problem-Oriented Policing Plan. And what it calls for officers, I'm sorry, I'm hearing something. And what it calls for is for officers to spend at least 20% of their time in non-enforcement activities with the community to build those relationships, understanding that we cannot address issues in our communities without the partnership, understanding, and engagement of community members. And so that has been a huge step forward in, we often say mending relationships, but I think that's unfair to the truth of what the history of the relationships have been. You have those in our communities that have had positive relationships, but as a whole, the communities feel like it has never been where it should be. So it's not just about mending relationships, it's actually creating relationships and being in relationships that have never occurred.
And also, I know one of the, just to follow up with that, another concern, and I don't think this is just unique to Cleveland, but the issue around having officers and law enforcement that are from the communities, that look like the communities, that have that cultural connection to communities. So can you speak a little bit about what's going on in Cleveland with regards to that?
Absolutely. And so it's not just a matter of having people who mirror the community for the sake of having people who mirror the community. Right? It's important that the people that apply and then are successfully hired actually have the skill sets that we're looking for the compassion, the understanding of the history of communities, that they value the residents in those communities. And so another deliverable in the consent decree is the recruitment plan. And so I am the officer in charge of recruitment, public safety. So the city of Cleveland, although the settlement agreement is with the city of Cleveland for the Division of Police, they took the opportunity to also then make a robust recruitment plan for fire, EMS, and the police as well. So the community says, yes, we want safety forces in fire and EMS as well that mirror our communities for the understanding of our communities. And so that's when people talk about having safety forces that mirror the community, it's because you understand the experiences. If you come from those communities, you understand better the experiences of those communities. I'll give you an example. We were standing outside one day with a recruitment class, and the recruits were lined up, and there was a young lady in a car who came up to the red light on the corner, and you could hear her. She had her music playing, and you could hear she was talking loud. And one of the recruits said, you know, oh, that's what we have to deal with. And so I approached that recruit and I asked him, you know, what do you mean by that? You know what I mean? Deal with what? In the city, urban youth, we're loud. We like our music loud. You know, that doesn't signal any element of criminality. It's simply because that's the culture, especially with the young folks. So to be really careful that we don't come in stigmatizing individuals simply on what we see in relationship to that, right? So that's when we talk about why we want people from the community and resemble the community, it's those kind of nuances that are important, that we have that type of understanding. Now, does that mean that only people from the community have that understanding? Absolutely not. We have a lot of officers who don't come up in urban communities. One of the stories I love to tell is about being a First 48 junkie and watching a segment one time, and there was a detective, a Kevin Leon Packer, who was with Atlanta PD. And the way that he handled the case was just so valuing of the folks who were involved in it. And so I called down to Atlanta and spoke with him, and he's a white male detective, and I asked him where he was from. And he says, ma'am, I'm from Niceville, Florida, okay? One stoplight town, right? So we want to ensure that we have people who have the character, the integrity, the compassion, the ability to treat people with dignity and respect, no matter where they're from. But we understand why we speak about, and what we know is that those qualities and skill sets are not just found in one segment of the population, right? So if your safety forces are majority, especially not the majority of that city, then you got some issues you need to look at, because those skill sets and characteristics are found in everyone. And we want the best and the brightest with those skill sets to serve our communities.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to transition a little bit, because we often talk about law enforcement as kind of that solution when we see violence, you know, and take place. But I want to talk a little bit and open this up for discussion about the role of restorative justice in this work. And I open this up to the panel. If you can talk about the role restorative justice has played in your work. What are the strategies that you've seen that have been most impactful in supporting and uplifting youth and families in Cleveland or Ohio or at large?
Good morning, everybody. I'll go first, if no one minds. And just my disclaimer, I will have to jump off a little early, but I'm certainly going to hang on as long as I can, because this is a very important conversation. My name is Sharina Cloud, and I am a former director of an organization that actually is a second chance organization. And by that, I mean the majority of the employees are formerly incarcerated, restored citizens come through the justice system, those who have had their experiences with Cleveland police and sometimes the suburban officers, those who have gone back to school some training, and then just really came to understanding that they needed to give back to their community. Many of the individuals were involved in gangs and groups growing up and had gotten high-ranking positions in those gangs and groups and realized the influence that they had negative, and then wanted to transition that, wanted to evolve that into something good, and begin to talk to young people in the community about their choices and why that road shouldn't be traveled. So that was very important to the community because, as Sharm said, what she didn't say, but what she was saying was that it needs to be more culturally competent officers that they're looking for, those who have the ability to be compassionate. So in light of that, you have people in the community also who need to police the community themselves. You know, we need to do a job of understanding each other. When we see things that are not right, speak on that. Those young people have that role model in the community to have in their household, to have in the community, to have individuals to say to them that things are not the way that they appear, and to give them examples of how they can not go down that wrong road. So Cleveland Peacemakers is that organization. And as far as the restorative justice is concerned, it was meant for those who had the influence in the community, who could then begin to help individuals transition out of life that they thought was the best for them at the time, which was that negative lifestyle. But the important thing to know is that the culture of the community, I'm just going to make sure I have my words right, the culture of the community is such that, as you said, 36% of the Black community is distrustful of the police, but they may be trustful of others, which means that they want to take things into their own hands when it comes to crime and retaliation. So when we speak about restorative justice, giving those individuals the opportunity to have that influence in the community, can speak to the good things that need to happen, where they can really begin to invest back into the community, which means we have to talk about the jobs, we have to talk about access to housing, we have to talk about the access to health, in order to put them in a position where they can help lead the community back to where it needs to be. All of that is a part of the restorative justice. And to just give those individuals who come through the system, whether it be the criminal justice system, the mental health system, those tools that they need to be able to help the community along and to impact the community the way it needs to be impacted. I agree with Yumi when she said those who are most experienced in this area, they need to be at the table so they can begin to make sure that understanding is there of the reality of what's really needed in the community. Again, just the accesses to all of the inequities that go on so that they can be addressed in a proper way. Because we'll sit around the tables, and I've sat around those tables, and we'll think that we're really being helpful because we may know some people. We may not have had the same experience, but we may know people, and we can look at a situation and tell what's best. But we really need individuals in the room who can help walk us through the process of how to get the community to move in a certain way that's in their best interest. And so therefore we need those individuals who've gone through that process. And there are many who understand that they made those mistakes earlier in life, and they really want to give back. They see the harm that they've done. They know that they've come through that process. They've gotten better. They've, again, gotten educated. They have been working. They're living in the community. They really want to be of help, and they are right where they're at. But those are the individuals and the people that we really need to, the communities that we really need to begin to invest in so that they can be more empowered to help the community rise up.
Thank you, Sharina. And I want to just go into a subject you mentioned a little bit more, because, when we talk about the violent act, it's typically a response to larger issues, whether it's food insecurities, inequities, and in the school system and more. Can you talk a little bit, and I open this up to others as well, to talk about some of those local wraparound services that are available to people? What are the organizations that you're working with doing to address some of those issues, health, housing, because those play a substantial role in the violence that we're seeing in these communities?
So, one thing I'll mention, and others can definitely jump in, is I know that the city of Cleveland, under the mayor's direction, has invested a huge amount of human capital and finance into the former recreation centers, now called the resource centers. Throughout the city of Cleveland is 21. And in those, the vision has been, and they began to put these things together prior to COVID, of course, to kind of shut everybody down, as to have a one-stop shop where young people and families can come and get the type of support that they need, from mental health, having social workers and trauma-informed, those who have been trained in trauma-informed care and approaches in those resource centers, so they can at least begin to assist people with the support that they need. By the resource centers being in the neighborhoods, and of course, all in the city of Cleveland, in the high focus areas. I hate to say the high crime areas, but the high focus areas. There are other partner agencies, social service agencies, community-based agencies that they're partnered with, that they can then make family referrals to, individual referrals to, so that families and individuals can get the support they need. We know that the food banks have stepped up around the city as far as the partnering. So really, it's been an effort to be a streamlined approach to meet the needs of the community that's in those areas. And it's not every area that's really high focus. Historically, there have been 5 to 7 communities in the city of Cleveland, or neighborhoods, that have experienced higher levels of violence than others. So I want to address those things in those areas, so they can get the help that they need, the support that they need.
I'd love to hear what Gino has to say, but I think we really need to get real here, though. A lot of youth don't feel like they can trust a lot of these organizations, don't know where to go for help. I mean, we see it day in and day out, that, there's just this lack of trust, and kids feeling very unsafe. And you got to remember, we're in COVID-19 right now. Kids don't have access to internet, kids don't have access to the resources. They don't have access to the rec centers right now. They don't have access to the libraries. And this is when kids have nothing to do and they're not in school. That's when trouble happens. So I think we need to be very real. Obviously, Cleveland has a lot of amazing resources. I'm not trying to say that we don't. But there's a huge disconnect. Organizations and youth, in my opinion, generally don't know how to work together because they don't understand each other. So we have organizations all the time calling us up like, how do you work with these youth? And you go to the youth, you have to build a relationship, but there is a disconnect and a lack of trust. I mean, we talk about that all the time with the youth council, all the time with our kids in YODJ. They don't know who to go to.
Before Gino jumps on, I just want to say you're absolutely correct, which is one of the reasons why the Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance formed, because they were the individuals who were from those communities who already had relationships in the community and were trusted. They're called credible messengers because they are seen in the community. So young people and older people know who they can go to, and they could get the information and the resources they need. Unfortunately, there's more people in need. There are more individuals in need than there are workers. But that's where partnerships come in, like you just said, with EYEJ, other community-based organizations who work with young people. But the relationship is the key. Because if there's no relationship with not just our young people, I mean all the way from like age 30 to 32, they're not going to receive what they need, and the cycle is going to continue.
Right. But we operate, sorry, Gino, but we operate in a society where we are after the fact, right?
Right. I agree.
Kind of what,
Yeah.
and the utmost respect, Cleveland Peacemakers Alliance, but and this is EYJ is more on the preventative side, but then we operate in a society where the money and the funding is after the fact. So
Yeah.
we need to shift
To be more in preventive, where I agree. There needs to be more in the preventive because it wouldn't have to be on the back end, all the things that you have to do as far as with the law enforcement and the court system. I agree. And hopefully with everything that's going on with the uprising in the communities now and the dissatisfaction and people really speaking out, that I'm not in agreement with defunding the police. I am in agreement with reallocating monies that will go more to the preventive side.
And investing greater in the well-being of young people in those community services. And to your point, Mai, I think that we do need to have a larger conversation around the disconnect. Young people do not trust some of these organizations. They may have the fanfare and the notoriety, but are they really reaching those communities and those children that are greatly impacted by violence, by communities that lack quality school systems, that lack opportunities for job and job training services? So to your point, Shauna, I think we need to have that look at investing in community resources that uplift and support young people.
And they have to be in the community.
In the community.
Times, they're not going to come, like Maya was saying, they're not going to come to the organization, to the people. We have to go to them.
Exactly. Yep. And Gina, would you like to chime in? Miguel?
Yeah, so I was trying to find the perfect time to beg this but I completely agree. One of the organizations that I partner with all the time is Impact Community Action. And I'm Gino Tucker, the CEO and founder of Member as Urban Scouts here in Columbus, Ohio. I was the former organizing director at the Juvenile Justice Coalition. And Impact Community Action is one of the organizations that is really there to meet the family holistically. We have to, because we can't change the environment of our kids and not change the environments that they go home to. Because it's like going to school. You send your kid to school to get the education. But if they come home and they get no work, no help with the homework, with the schoolwork, the whole job and the role now stays on the teacher. And we're not holding our responsibility as the parents, as community members, to help our kids in the needs and the things that they need to survive. And a lot of that comes from the organizational structures that we fight. A lot of organizations cause more harm to these kids than they do help them. And just like Mike said, we have to focus on the preventative. As a country, we're so reactive. We want to react to what you do. We don't want to prevent it. And I just said this with some thunders. There's always money for kids that's involved in juvenile or the justice system, foster care, and don't get me wrong, we need that money there. But we need money to the kids that's right there. Like, I'm not trying to be in the streets. I'm trying to stay in school, but my mom's rent due. I'm going to work and I'm only working 10 hours a week for $100, and that's not helping me. I got a friend down the street though who make $1,000 a week. Right? Where's our kids gonna go to? They're gonna go to a friend that's making $1,000 a week. Like, man, help me out. And that once again leads us to trying to actively get them back instead of putting programs in place and putting money into the programs that are already in place to help fund these kids. For instance, we are launching a youth development paid program, 5-week program, paying kids $13.50 an hour for 20 hours a week. When I say that these kids are so excited to go work, it ain't that they don't want to work, they're not given opportunities, they're not given exposure. And we're doing landscaping, something that they can actually take with them and don't need me to continue to do. They can go start their own business in landscaping. I have a partner that's one of the largest in Ohio that's going to train the kids. It's about putting the exposure in front of their faces and letting them choose what they want to do. I tell a lot of people all the time, one of my friends that told me, like, man, my son is bad. He keep making rap videos. Listen, I'm like, that ain't bad. He's showing you what his interest is. And it's up to us as parents and community leaders to recognize the interest that these kids are showing us and find a positive, healthy lane to put them in so that way they can have what the sky's the limit once they understand they have the support. The support is the main piece we have to give these kids. If I go home and we know our communities, dad might not be there. If dad is there, it might be some situations with mom and dad that cause the household to be unhealthy. Or it's a single mom household, which may have other situations that cause it to be unhealthy. We have to make sure that we are hitting it holistic. Like, I love everybody, but my fight is for the kids. My fight is for the youth. Because I believe that we have to invest in them what we want to see them do and change by the time they get our age. I'm not about to argue with a grown adult about why the decisions you made got you where you at and how to change. I'd rather put that energy into a kid. But that's when we come together with partners who specialize in that. And they bring in the family resources, the family help, like Impact. And then we have to get our kids in our Black communities understanding of counseling and therapy. Because there's so much post-traumatic stress that these kids and that we have came through from generations. And it's still there. It hasn't been broken down. It hasn't been dealt with. It's just compiling more and more to where your thought process is that out of hurt. And then once you actually start doing better in life and you're not in the struggle no more, your brain doesn't recognize how to not live in the struggle. So all these things are compiled. You 15, like, you don't even know how to process half the information that you're coming across, period. Now we got generational trauma. We got trauma that you see every day. We got household trauma. We got, I need money. I don't know where to get money from. I don't know, my mom and dad didn't graduate college, let alone high school. They can't help me with my homework. All this on top of a kid makes them want to go do drugs, go hang out, go rob, go kill, whatever they feel like will help them get to the next day. Because I hate to say it, they not worried about policy. They're not worried about changing no policy when it's going to take 4 to 5 years for it to actually go into effect. That's the, come on, y'all, need help. Excuse me. You know how it is. But when you have a year to build the support around what policy you're trying to get, a year to try to get it on the ballot. Give me one second.
So I'll just add on to that. So the thing that really bothers me is that with all the youth, I mean, we've served 1,500 youth, that they feel, they feel that all that's happening, this violence, all that, it's their responsibility. They feel blamed. And as a culture, we do that constantly. We blame the police. Okay, yes, the police has to be blamed for certain things, but we blame the youth for what we've done to them. And that constantly happens. And I think the call to action for me is for those that are watching this, and I'm probably the best person that can say this on this panel, is that every single person who's on this panel, give us all a break and give us support, because it is up to the community right now to create this change. We can't put all of the responsibility on the people on this panel.
I agree.
Can I speak?
But it always has been. It always has been a community issue. But it's we've taken the easy way out by blaming, like you said, everybody else. But the saying is, if you can maintain and change your own little space in the world, then it's a ripple effect for the rest of the world. So I agree with you. It is a community issue.
And you were going to say something, Sergeant?
Yes, and y'all tell me to shut up when it's because there's so much to unpack here. Because so I'll try to, align it with the goals and the efforts of the City of Cleveland Division of Police. When we talked about folks being involved, and we have the police committees that meet at the commanders meetings, and those are places where folks can come. We have the Cleveland Community Police Commission, and they are online. They have meetings. Of course, COVID has shut a lot down, but they have meetings in the community as well. People can send their concerns, issues, hopes, dreams to them as well as the mayor's action line. The mayor and the chief Calvin Williams did a town hall the other day, and he said, you can always call even his office and put your concerns on there. But when we were talking about young people and people in the community not trusting certain agencies, we can never forget that hurt people hurt people. We still have we have a lot of people that get into the get into the helping profession who need help themselves. Mm-hmm. So they are in positions and they want to help people. They want to, and a lot of times their help is damaging. I used to determine eligibility for food stamps, Medicaid, AFDC. And you want to talk about some wounded folks. There was a worker once that found it laughable that they could sanction someone right before Thanksgiving, keeping that family's food stamps from them. When we talk about our walking wounded, when you talk about people who are walking around with PTSD and they want to help because it helps to feel something inside of them, but they first need to go and address what the hole is in themselves to begin with. So I love when someone was talking about, when Gino was talking about counseling and that not being something that we're ashamed of or feel that we don't have. We also need to give less attention to those who say, oh, we're blaming our situation. As soon as you hear that, shut them down. They are not part of what is going to help us, because that's real important. It's true that we are still a community in pain. The effects of drug addiction, lack of employment, underfunded education are real. So if someone wants to blow that off of, oh, we're trying to shift blame or make excuses for our behavior, what we do is stop. Don't listen to that, because that takes away from what we're trying to do. It takes away from our focus. So, and we have to understand each other and love each other. So one of the things that you all talked about, folks doing things when they're younger. And as they get older, they understand. So with the Cleveland Division of Police, what we know is that we brought in the training called Strategies for Youth Policing the Teen Brain. And teaching officers about brain development. The brain, where we thought was fully developed at 21, it is not. It's more like 25. So, impulse control is larger when you're younger. So we have to, it only makes sense to start making decisions out of science and craft. If we're going to be a profession, let's be professional, and then let's use things that come from science and better understand how that plays out in how we hire, how we engage with our young people on the street. Being a police officer, you learn, if you roll up on a group of teenagers, what are y'all doing, this, that, and other, and they start laughing and stuff, they're not disrespecting you. Get out of your feelings, like the kids say. They're not disrespecting you. That's what teenagers do when they're nervous and they're stressed. But if you see that as a threat to your authority, where does it go from there? Don McCray is someone who's been in law enforcement for years, over 30 years. And we had a training not too long ago about, is our training, are we failing recruits? And we don't explain. We talk about de-escalation with the police. But now in the information age and all the videos, what we see is oftentimes that it is the officer that is escalating the situation. So how about non-escalation in these situations? So as we know better, we do better, and our training becomes better, and our hiring becomes better, because you can't get the right behavior from the wrong people. So if we're not hiring correctly, we're going to have an issue there too. So COVID-19 really highlighted how we have become this individualistic society. And a lot of the remedies that we are speaking on have to be done collectively and have to be done in community. We have to love each other and care about each other. And when we see our walking wounded, we talk about violence in the community. When we talk about, and Gino talked about a lot of those things. There's another gentleman that I just love listening to his trainings, and Anthony Bauza, B-O-U-Z-A. He was commander chief in New York, Minneapolis, I believe, some other places. But 20 years ago, we was talking about these same things. If you're with drug addiction, you're dealing with inadequate housing, you're dealing with the lack of employment, you're going to feel hopeless. And what do you do? And so that's a human issue. It's not a moral failing. So I'm going to stop there. But all of these things make sense. And if nothing else, if COVID-19 and what it has highlighted for our communities has done nothing else, I hope that it brings us together to support one another, to love one another, to be honest about what our true issues are, and hold one another accountable for those who can, because all of us cannot be effective in assisting one another. And everything is not everybody's lane. I don't want just anybody working with our teenagers, because they shouldn't be. Okay, because they got their own issues they need to work out. So understanding that people are appropriately placed so we don't do more harm under the guise of helping.
Just really quickly, if there are any questions from the audience, Facebook or Zoom, please submit those now, and we'll answer those in the next 2 to 3 minutes. So just submit those right now. And back to you, Miguel. You gonna say?
She has, thank you. You are absolutely right, because a lot of the people have not addressed their own trauma, and they're hurt and in pain. And I say it all the time, like a lot of these organizations that come together out of pain, they resonate through pain. They build through pain. They build through hurt. So that's the culture that organization will have, is that we're hurt. And when you get hurt, we're coming to come help you get through your hurt. But it's not that. It's we're going to come organize with you out of hurt. And we're going to do everything out of hurt and out of pain. And, because I'm still hurt. I'm still messed up inside. And I say to everybody, if you have not took the time during COVID-19 to reflect, you ain't had nothing but time. If you didn't take that time to reflect on yourself and how to make yourself better, you wasted that time. Because the best phrase, hurt people hurt people. Hurt organizations hurt hundreds of people. Yep. Because these people are running to you for help. Yep. They're in time of dire need. They're extra vulnerable. So we have to stop organizing out of hurt and pain and organize out of what we want to see happen. The happiness, the purity of the conversations we have with each other. The purity of the relationships we want to build, and stop being so segregated. When we work, we doing the same work. If you're doing great work, man, I'm not about to sit there and come to you like, well, I'm about to open up a building next door and I'm about to do the same thing you're doing. Nah, you partner. Yes. Might be some things that she needs help with or they need help with that you can help them with, and vice versa. We are never too high up or too defined to learn more or to improve on ourselves or the organizations that we work with. And just for here in Columbus, And for the people that don't know, Henry Green the fifth was my nephew. He was killed by our Columbus Police Department. The relationship is hurt between the Black community and the police. And I applaud you for coming on here and standing up and representing somebody that we need to see in the police force. Because, and y'all know this, when you work with the police, you get labeled as a snitch. So that is a real problem for our community leaders to sit there and try to find a way to bridge the gap between the hurt that the police and the systems that the police have caused in the community and what they want out of it. You right there in the middle trying to bridge the gap, but if you lean too far to either side, you lose support from one of them sides. So we have to be gracious and really come up with a plan that helps us. And I'm just saying, like any war that you go to, if you want a war to take out your enemy, or however you want to look at it, you're going to infiltrate. So we need to make sure that our kids are the ones in the police station. Our kids are the ones that's the detectives, the internal affairs and all that. They need to grow up and be in there, because now, instead of having people come and survey and say they're going to protect your neighborhood, you are the one protecting your neighborhood. And who better to help protect your neighborhood than somebody that's there, that's been there, that understands the people in that community. I'm done.
I agree. Oh my, if I could just say real quick, thank you, Miguel. You had some awesome points there. And one thing, when Junior was actually talking earlier, one thing I noticed working in the community is that the community has always said that if we could just get an apology. I know that they're great police officers, but then like Miguel was saying, there's a lot of hurt there. So just an apology, not specifically one-on-one, but we know that there's been some pain caused to the community. So we apologize and we pledge that we want to work closer with you all, as the sergeant was saying. And I think that will go a long way, because that will begin to build the trust. And then to the point about the organization, you are absolutely right. I've been working in this field since 1990, and there are lots of hurt people who work in organizations with the intent of helping, but because they haven't worked out their own trauma, they cause more pain. But for those of us who work in organizations and work in the community, we have to begin to hold the organizations accountable, and in a respectful, loving manner. But we have to be able to point out those deficiencies, because, as you said, organizations hurt hundreds of people. So we do have to do our part with that.
So I just want to mention, huge respect to Charmin, because we actually did a whole segment where the police came in and Charmin led that, where they literally apologized to our youth, and that was an incredible leadership experience. And I agree with both Gina and Sharina. I mean, I personally have been attacked by very hurt people in an organization. And I say this again, is that the community needs to step up to the plate, because we put all this pressure on the organizations that are doing the work, and that is not right. And also reparations are important. Funding is very important as well. One thing I just want to bring up too is that we haven't talked about is the media. So when we did our evaluation with our kids, asking them where they learned about violence from, we had 38% of them say they learned about it from the news. And so the media has an incredible responsibility to stop showing only the negatives of what's happening in the African American community, because there is so much positive. There are so many heroes, there are so many great stories, but yet it is sellable to keep on showing the negative that's happening to African Americans, and that needs to stop.
Adding on to that, I completely agree. As part of the Youth Council, we've been working on getting broadband internet and connectivity to the entire city of Cleveland, which I think would be really positive for what my mom was talking about, the media. We need more Black people, more Black kids in the media to represent their communities, because obviously the media is being controlled by people that are of power, which are traditionally white and not people of color. So not everyone is truly being represented. And also the media can be a great source of information and education if it is done correctly. I think we really need support on connectivity.
Yes, great. Thank you. So we're about to wrap up, but I'll open this up so each of the speakers give a brief summary or one point for what's next. Where do we take this conversation from here? And I'll open it up to Sharina, because I know you have to leave, or did she already?
Yeah, she had to go.
Okay, she just left. So I'll let's start with Sergeant Leon, and we'll take it from there. So what's next?
So I think what's next, especially where this is concerned, again, I go back to what opportunities have happened right now with COVID-19, and for us all to understand we don't want to go back to what we had before this. And it's time for us to come together. And so my biggest thing, and what the topic I'm working on with our summer pipeline students this year, in addition to law in your community, what do you do when you engage with the police, is find your lane. Find your lane. Whatever your passion is, of course, mine is law enforcement reform. But if it is education, especially education, we don't know what's about to happen with that. If it's healthcare, wherever our disparities are, because that's what we see are the aftermath of the disparities. And so find your lane. When Mai talks about the community needs to step up, again, for me, I say those who can do, because there are those who they'll do well just to get themselves in order. You know what I mean? And as the water rises, and I say as the water rises, all boats rise. So the healthier ones that are able carry the others until we all are doing better. We are still dealing with the effects and the ravages of the drug epidemic, of inadequate housing, of inadequate education. So those who can do. And I believe that we are being mobilized. You don't have sustained demonstrations, not only nationally, internationally, when it's business as usual. It's not. It is no business as usual anymore. It's a new day. Amen. This is not going back to where we were. I can't see it. I know I'm not going to be a part of that. And I have so many people, my phone doesn't stop ringing. My emails don't stop popping. Nothing. I don't have a free hour in the day. And I'm cool with that, because that's good living, right? So I don't believe that anybody who's able is going to be able to rest on any laurels at this point. We are about moving forward. Amen. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Miguel?
Yeah, I would love to just add to that. What I feel like is next. I'll put it back there. What I feel like really is next, and I'm glad, Sharma, you spoke on the education piece. I'm not gonna lie, I've been extremely stressed out about next for our kids. Because here in Columbus, our kids are going to, and my kids they go year round. They start school next week. It's 2 days a week in class and 3 days at home. I know we already suffering from education problems. Some of our parents and grandparents is raising kids now. Let's throw that out there. And then they probably got a 7th to 8th grade education. Some of the parents who are raising kids do not have adequate education. And now it's all online. So now we expect for the parents, God forbid they working, to be able to find a way to have somebody watch their kids on the day that they are not at school. And trust that they're going to help them better their education. I'm going to be honest, our kids are about to fall behind. Yep. That's what's next. If we don't find a way to address that right now, our kids are going to fall behind. Our high school students in Columbus are not going to school until the 3rd quarter. That means next year. And that's a real problem for me. So what I'm doing is, and I don't know if I want to say we got to call them out, but these churches got big buildings. They got a lot of classrooms. They got a lot of space where kids can socially distance and be in these classrooms, getting assistance on their homework. And at the same time, we can be putting the education that they need from us in their brains. We have the opportunity to do real freedom schools with the curriculum of the city schools already their curriculum. So we're going to make sure that they pass your test that you want them to pass. But we need to educate them so they can pass our test too. So we have that opportunity right now to make sure that our kids are getting educated by the city and by us. And we need to call on these organizations that have the space to open their doors, let our kids in. We make sure we got the I ain't want to say the best, but the right mentors in these spaces to help these kids further their education and teach them about themselves. Teach them about life skills. Teach them about how to understand your self-worth. The problem is these kids don't understand self-worth. If I'm not worth nothing, do I care if I die tomorrow? Do I care if I kill you tomorrow? And like, that's our next step. Like, it's a million things that need to get done, policies that need to be changed and all that. But if we drop the ball right now with our kids' education, all that ain't going
to Yumi?
So moving forward, I think what is important is continuing discussions just like this one, bridging worlds from people that don't actually experience this violence and this oppression on a daily basis and bridging them to people that experience this and are able to tell their stories. Also, conversation is great, but action is really what we need right now, especially with the current Black Lives Matter movement. Obviously, all the advocacy that is going around, I think it's the best time for us to propose as much policy that we can, because people are really listening. People are opening their ears and considering other points of view for the first times in their lives. So I think we really need to work on advocating for the youth, the people that are being us dealing with this violence, and move forward from
there. Okay, Mai?
Sure. So 2 things for the viewers that are watching this. What's next? I urge you, I ask you, I beg you to go up to Black youth and tell them that this is not their fault. That's number 1. And number 2, what's next is I'm super excited to see what the Youth Council team is going to be implementing actually starting next week. It is powerful because what's next is that we need broadband in this city for our youth due to what's happened with COVID-19, and internet in general is a utility that everyone should have access to, and it is unacceptable that 40% of our youth do not have access to internet broadband, or 3/4 don't have access to devices. So I'm super excited with the amazing work that the EYEJ Youth Council is about to produce and for you all to see.
Great. And with that, we will conclude the program. I just want to say, as an EYEJ volunteer, it has been a pleasure to host this week's episode. There were so many other things we wanted to get into. Mai, to your point about the media and technology, about gun violence specifically, there are just the impact of COVID. There are just so many things that we wanted to get into that we couldn't this time. But be sure to check out our blog recap, where we'll summarize some of these key points, have some additional resources on the website. Also, check out the EYEJ Speaks podcast, which can be found on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and other major platforms. So we'll be continuing the conversation about this subject of exploring violence on that platform. I would love to thank the entire EYEJ team for helping to make this possible. So Tara, Mega, Jaywin, Anna, Haley, Pia, Andre, of course you, Mai, for all of your work. And I just want to remind everybody, July 24th, mark it on your calendar. The Youth Council will have their Day of Giving. And there will be a special session from 12 to 2, excuse me, I said earlier a different time, from 12 to 2. where you'll hear from the youth council members. They'll be talking about the broadband initiative that they're working on and many other things. So be part of that program, and we'll see you next week at 10 a.m. We'll have a new topic and another fantastic slate of panelists. So have a great day, and justice for Breonna Taylor.
Thank you. Justice for all. Have a good one.
Bye.